Good evening, everyone. We are so pleased to welcome you to our ASQ Innovation Division Technical Community meeting tonight. We are so excited to have our own Mr. Peter Merrill talk to you all about innovation certification, the creation of ISO 56001. As you know, ISO is an internationally accepted auditable innovation management system standard that will enable IMS certification. It was recently published, and the presenter of the session, our own Mr. Peter Merrill, was the international project lead for this new standard. So he is going to take you through the clauses of the standard, show key audit points, and really bring together the demand behind the standard, what it's going to do for the collaborative coalition of organizations who want to drive vigor, financial assurances, and innovative organizations seeking to partner with other innovators. So you are in for a treat. He has begun his career in R&D. He has been the chief executive of a leading design brand, and he has implemented many management systems across global innovative companies such as IBM, AIG, and BlackBerry. Again, the founding chair of our ASQ Innovation Division, one of the key catalysts behind our innovation bodies of knowledge, and again, the key international project lead on this new auditable innovation standard. If you have not gotten a chance to read Mr. Merrill's thought leadership, he's the author of Innovation Generation, Innovation Never Stops, and his most recent book, ISO 56000, Building Innovation into Your QMS. So without further ado, I will turn it over to our phenomenal guest speaker, Mr. Peter Merrill, for our scheduled topic.
Okay. I am just checking that everybody can see my screen. Can
Absolutely
you see my...
perfect.
Okay. So, good evening, everyone. Well, depending on where in the world you are, working in the world of ISO, I've come to learn that it could be early hours of the morning for some people, or it could be the middle of the afternoon for others. I am going to start off with a quote from somebody you've all heard of, Machiavelli. He is actually the first recorded mention of the word innovation, and it was in his book, The Prince. And that's the kind of book that we all read when we were students. Machiavelli said, "Those who innovate will get little support from those who will benefit and downright opposition from those who will not." And I can promise you that is very true of this journey to get 56001 published. It's been a long, hard road. But the good news is this is now here to help you on that innovation journey. I'm going to fast forward then to the 20th century. And the first management book, as we know it, I mean, there are thousands, tens of thousands out there now, but the first that was actually written in the 20th century was by Peter Drucker. And his book, The Practice of Management, on page 53, I still have my sort of rather yellowed copy of it from when I did my MBA. And he says, there are only two things that matter in business: innovation and marketing. In other words, have something which is different from the competition and which they can't copy, then sell it. So with that introduction, let me take you into 56001 and what it is. It's an international standard, it's auditable, and it's an innovation management system. when we started this journey, it actually began 6 years ago, would you believe? People were saying, no, it's not possible. You can't audit innovation. Well, they were the people who didn't understand. Actually, it says here 40 plus national standards body, nearly 50 national standards bodies have been involved in the development of this standard. And it was finally published last month on the 10th of September, which I can tell you was a great feeling when we got there. As Rhonda mentioned, I led the project. And the reason why we did it? Well, multiple reasons. First of all, a lot of people misunderstand innovation. They think it's a sort of random, ad hoc, drops out of the sky kind of thing. But in fact, it is something that if you do it properly and systematically, you get serial innovation. And that's what people want. We want to be always looking for what's next, not satisfied with what we've just achieved, but moving on to the next thing. And that's what a management system does. Also, interestingly, research by IBM has shown that 95% of innovators partner. And we tend to take partnering for granted these days. We don't realize how many companies we do partner with. The thing is, when we're partnering, we want to be sure that the other company can manage innovation. And a third very good reason, and this is going to build over time, governments, investors, financial grants, people up till now have tended to look for, well, have you got a good idea? As this standard gets out there, they're going to be asking, well, you've got a good idea. Do you know how to manage it through to fruition? And that leads me to the last point on this slide. And that is that research by McKinsey that was published in Harvard Business Review showed that 84% of leaders said innovation was extremely important, but 94% were dissatisfied with the results. In other words, people want it, but it's not been done well enough so far. And that's what the systemic approach will bring to the table. So I keep using the word innovation, and there are many definitions of it. The one that I like is not an official definition. It's one I picked up at a conference in Riyadh a few years ago now, and it was a guy from GE who used it. He said, innovation is something new that makes people happy. And I like that because there is a big emotional aspect in innovation. It can apply to a product, which is what we tend to think of, a service, a process, internal innovation, and believe it or not, there has been more business model innovation in the last decade than almost any other type of innovation. A lot of business model innovation going on. And one of the things that we come up against frequently when we are working in the world of quality management, and quality management is a vital partner with innovation management, is what is the difference between improvement and innovation? And these two things are clearly defined in the 56,000 series. It's actually the 56,000 document itself which has the terms and definitions. So improvement is a change in an existing entity. In other words, the existing entity is still there, but it's been made better. Innovation is a completely new entity that did not exist before. So I mentioned already that we've got around about 50 national standards bodies that have been involved. And the four standards are 56,000, which gives us the terms and definitions, the vocabulary, and also the principles. Then 56,001, which is the requirements document, and 56,002, which is the guidance document. And you notice the guidance document was published in 2019 before we wrote the requirements document. And there are a number of reasons for that, but it actually worked out well because when I put together the working draft for 56,001, we'd got a lot of the hard work done with 56,002, and we just really trimmed it down. But in 2020, we all know what happened. The first year of our project, COVID hit, and that really impacted us. We'd been so used to face-to-face meetings, and that went out of the window. And there was a whole new protocol with virtual meetings. But we found our way through, and we got published. So I keep using the word system. So I'd like to take you into system thinking. And that's something that is relatively recent. It came as a result of the book that Peter Senge wrote, The Fifth Discipline. You've probably heard of that book if you've not actually read it. And system thinking is what all ISO management system standards are based on. So here is the model that I use to explain the ISO management system. It's one we developed 10 years ago when we were first writing 56,002. A guy called Magnus Carlson from Sweden and myself, we worked together and we developed this and we loved it. But then people started messing with it. And the final document that got into the standard, I call it the basket of snakes. Anyway, you didn't hear me say that. What I'm going to take you through is this model. And the reason I like it is because it's easy to understand. George Box at the Software Engineering Institute said, all models are wrong, but some are useful. And I find this very useful. So at the heart of the model is the plan, do, check, act cycle. In an ISO harmonized structure, which is the basis of all ISO management systems, this model applies to all management system standards. So planning, doing in the operations, checking in performance evaluation, and acting in the improvement area. And these revolve around the support hub. And the PDCA cycle is often referred to as the Deming or Shewhart cycle. But I have news. They got the idea from someone else, a guy called Sir Francis Bacon, who in 1620, innovation has been around for a long time. In 1620, Francis Bacon wrote a book called Novum Organum, or in English, New Method, what today we call scientific method. And we've all heard of scientific method. And scientific method is observe, plan, do, check, act. And this clause 4 in the standard is where we observe, where we look outside the organization, where we look inside the organization. We look outside to see what are the opportunities, what are the threats. We look inside for what are our weaknesses and what are our strengths. And that's a leadership job. That initiates strategy. But then the job of the leadership is to feed the knowledge of that into strategic planning, which falls into their territory, and then feed the strategic plan into the operational part of the business. So hopefully that's given you a feel for what a management system looks like. And I've given you the definition up on the top right. A system is a set of interrelated and interacting elements. And I quite deliberately have not shown you all interrelations and interactions because there's a lot of them. So let's move on then. I'm going to talk first of all about clause 4, the context. Oh no, I'm sorry, I've forgotten this slide. Yes, this is important. You see all the blue text. Those are the clauses that, should we call them the sub-clauses, within each of those high-level clauses that I just showed you. So I showed you clause 4 context in the model just now, and that breaks out into 4 parts. Then clause 5 was leadership, clause 6 was planning, and so on. The blue text shows the clauses which have to be in every management system. The red items are clauses that we have added for the purpose of the innovation management system. Innovation is a strategic activity. It looks into the future. ISO 9001 refers to strategic direction, but it doesn't ask for documentation of strategy. ISO 9001 does not address culture. There is a 10,000 series document just recently published on culture, but we're actually going to audit culture. Then in clause 6, we have portfolio, a critical tool for managing innovation. Structure, which is something we have to think about, and it relates to culture. What we mean here is structure of the organization. And then very importantly, collaboration. I've already mentioned that 95% of innovators collaborate. And then 9001 has all its add-ons in the operations area. So that shows you the fundamental difference. Innovation is very strategic. 9001 is very operational, but we do have a couple of clauses that we've got in the operations area, in particular, the innovation process. Now, having said that, within these clauses, such as within resources, there will be sub-clauses, and I'll come to those in due course. But I'm going to start off with this clause 4.1 context. It's only got a little bit added to it, but a critical addition. These are the subclauses in the harmonized structure in context of the organization, clause 4. 4.1, understanding the context. 4.2, interested parties. 4.3, scope. And 4.4, establishing the system. We've added a very small subclause here, innovation intent. And that means that as soon as we've addressed areas of opportunity in 4.1, we need to at least start settling on which direction are we going, what's our intention. This is very similar to vision. In the guidance document, we used to have vision there, but we replaced it with intent because it's more auditable, it's more definable. So let me take you into clause 4.1. This is the really interesting and important clause where it all begins. You recognize this diagram. It's a SWOT analysis. The SWOT analysis was first developed by a person called Albert Humphrey at Stanford University. And it came as a result of a project he was working on, which was looking at why corporate planning failed. But first of all, let me just show you the text which clause 4.1 opens with in all management systems. 9001, 14001, 27001, and the list goes on. The opening line is, the organization shall determine external and internal issues relevant to its purpose. And in 56001, we've added the text, determine areas of opportunity for value realization. That's ISO text for areas for innovation opportunity. And in the world of quality management, we do the SWOT analysis, but we focus very much on weaknesses and threats. And we work on those weaknesses, we work on those threats to strengthen our processes and reduce our risk. In the world of innovation, we work on opportunities, but also on strengths. Let me just explain what each of these words means. Strengths asks, what do you do better than others? Weaknesses, where are you doing a poor job? Threats, what worries you? And innovators focus on areas of opportunity, but we need strengths to support those opportunities. You may see a great opportunity out there, but have you got the competencies, the technologies, the processes to leverage that opportunity? So those two go together. So you can see that there's a different focus right at the get-go between innovation and quality management. And you'll notice at the bottom of the line, I've shown you what the auditor will ask for. The standard does not say you have to do a SWOT analysis, but pretty much everybody does that. It's the easiest tool to use. It's the easiest to explain. The auditor is going to go through your SWOT analysis and ask you, how have you agreed on these opportunities? What are the strengths that you've got that will enable you to leverage the opportunities? And what are the competencies and technologies that you're going to have to outsource to meet these opportunities? In other words, straight away, where are you going to collaborate? Just a minute, my screen keeps freezing. Here we are. So then we're into leadership, and there's a couple of small clauses added here, which I'm not going to spend a lot of time on. I am going to point out, for those of you who are not familiar with ISO standards, that clause 511, the general clause, is the to-do list for leaders. There are probably 10 or a dozen items in there that leaders have to do. They have to integrate the management system in the business. They are ultimately responsible for the results, and the list goes on. 512, interestingly, value realization, is very similar in its sort of intent to customer focus in 9001. The difference for innovators, we've not yet got a customer, so we're looking at value realization. We've also, later in the game, put in change management in this clause, because leaders are ultimately responsible for implementing change management. Policy, I find nobody has a problem integrating innovation into their quality policy. If you're not familiar with ISO standards and you see the word policy, you think, what? This sounds a bit rigid for innovation. Think of mission statement. It's very similar. But the two clauses that I'm going to go deep on are strategy and culture in just a moment. We've moved roles and responsibilities out to clause 5.5. In 9001, it's 5.3. Don't ignore this. When you're starting out particularly, you want to have clear roles and responsibilities. They will be changing regularly. I used to do a roles and responsibility review with my key reports every 3 months. It's tough, but when you're innovating, things change rapidly. So let's get into these two, strategy and culture. The word strategy, I find, is used very loosely. It's used for just about anything, I find. And when I was, I forget which book it was, one of the books I was writing, I thought, I'm going to find out what this really means. And I did a bit of research, and I found it goes back to the Greek word strategia, and it means the art of the general. Strategy is what the general lays out. They identify what are the obstacles that they see in the battle ahead, and how are they going to overcome those obstacles. So in our management system, excuse me, we need to develop strategic objectives, but importantly, how are we going to achieve them? And we'll see a little later, there's a clause 6.2, which is innovation objectives, which this will link through to. But importantly, this innovation strategy links back to that opening clause 4.1, understanding the context. So you're starting to see these linkages between different elements of the standard, linkages backward, linkages forward. Now, having set strategic objectives, that enables us then to set tactical objectives, in other words, the day-to-day stuff, and very importantly, and we'll come to this, establish a portfolio. This is a critical tool for the innovator. Now, going back to our friend the general, there's another saying that I'm going to share with you. No battle plan ever survives first contact with the enemy. And that's attributed to just about every general in history. I like to attribute it to Sun Tzu, who wrote The Art of War. Our strategy has to be flexible. It has to be adaptable, because we are dealing with uncertainty in the world of innovation. When you're audited, expect to show the auditor not just the strategy that you've got now, but how it has developed, how it has evolved over time, how it has evolved from that original SWOT analysis, how it links forward to your innovation objectives in clause 6.2. I said at the beginning of this clause that I find the word strategy is misused. And I find that strategic planning is frequently not strategic planning. It's just a warmed over version of last year's business plan. Real strategic planning is looking well into the future. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples. Netflix, first of all. They're an everyday organization for us now. They started working on streaming movies in 2007. They'd actually started the concept even before that. Their immediate competitor, as we know, was Blockbuster, who stayed with the idea of renting movies. Netflix advanced a bit beyond that. But in 2007, we were only on 3G. I know that because I was consulting with BlackBerry at that time. So now we're on 5G. Netflix foresaw the development of the internet and could see that streaming movies would be a fact of life in the future. Another company, IBM. I worked with IBM, consulting with them back in the 90s. And I remember so clearly when they sold off their hardware. Lenovo bought their hardware operation. IBMers were absolutely horrified. And at the same time, IBM bought Lotus Notes. Their first step into artificial intelligence. They did a bit of software, but nothing much. Lotus Notes was their first step. By the year 2000, they were into knowledge management, and they've advanced beyond that. They were looking 10, 20 years into the future, rather like Netflix. That is strategic planning. And obviously, you're dealing with a lot of uncertainty when you're doing that. And that's why you need good portfolio management. Now, culture is the one that everybody said, oh, how can we possibly audit culture? Well, yes, you can. And I mentioned Peter Drucker already, and there's a famous quote from him: culture eats strategy for breakfast. Well, culture has to be a key component in your strategic plan, culture development. And the people who define culture are the leaders. Their behaviors, rather like parents, define the behaviors inside the organization. We need two types of behavior, though, when we're innovating. We need behaviors that create loose, creative behaviors. We need behaviors that deliver, highly focused, linear, and fast. So these two sets of behaviors have to coexist. And that's why I mentioned earlier that structure thing we have to think about, but I'll come back to that. one of the things the standard has as a requirement is to analyze our current culture with an assessment tool. And I'll show you one in a moment. The sort of things you'll analyze is how good are we at exploration, at collaboration, at experimentation, at ideation, at commercialization, and the list goes on. Once you've found out what are the areas you need to work on and strengthen, expect significant culture change to take a couple of years. I haven't got time tonight, but the model for culture change that I like is from John Cotter and his book, Leading Change. Start with an early win. Find one of your areas of weaknesses and attack it quickly. Your auditor is going to ask you to show them your culture analysis and the subsequent actions you've taken. So what's that going to look like? You'll see at the bottom of this screen a web link which will take you into a culture assessment. So you might want to make a note of that as, sorry I couldn't squeeze a QR code onto this slide. But anyway, there are 9 sections, 9 elements to this assessment tool, and the link will take you through to the assessment tool, and it'll automatically score you on each of the items. Those things I just talked about: exploration, collaboration, experimentation, all the way through to commercialization. Each section has got 5 questions, and you just have to click whether you strongly agree, disagree, or strongly disagree. What I suggest is it's often good to get the leadership team to do it as one group, and then get the company as a whole to do it, because you often find some surprises for the leadership team there. Anyway, there's a tool you can use. Just go straight into our website with this link, and you'll be able to do your assessment. All right, I'm going to move on. Now we're into the planning clause, and this is the beginning of the plan, do, check, act cycle. The first clause here was the result. It resulted in a lot of controversy. I had a big fight with Central Secretariat. They wanted to retain the text risk and opportunities, and we wanted to use the term opportunities and risks because we excuse me, because we do it differently with innovation. We list all our opportunities and evaluate the risk attached to each opportunity to prioritize our opportunities, and that's different from what quality folks do. From those opportunities, we then set those objectives that I was referring to a little earlier. Where I'm going to focus now in this clause is on these 3 items. I'm going to go into a slide on portfolio and go into one on collaboration, but I'll deal with structure now. There are many ways of dealing with organization structure. I'm going to give you 3 classic ways. One is to hive it off into a department, an innovation school or lab or something like that, still in the company, but separate. That's what Lockheed Martin did way back in World War II, and it led to the term skunk works. You might have heard that term, skunk works. It actually comes from Little Abner, but Lockheed Martin, that's what they did for their innovation work. Another way is the one that Procter & Gamble did with their CEO, A.G. Lafley. He saw that their research and development was so slow, they hived off. They actually subcontracted their creative work. The third way, which I, excuse me, really like, is W.L. Gore. Bill Gore, you might not have heard of W.L. Gore, but you have heard of Gore-Tex, the outdoor fabric. They're a multi-billion-dollar corporation. They don't seek a lot of publicity, but they are incredibly well run. And Bill Gore was the, should we call it, the inventor, the creator of self-managed teams back in the 50s and 60s. And I've worked in that kind of environment when I worked with Phil Crosby. We use self-managed teams. They work really well for innovation. But the two I'm going to go into are portfolio and collaboration. Sorry about this, guys. It's the price of travel. Okay, I forgot. I've got a slide before I do those two. Risk analysis in clause 6.1. Traditionally, I just mentioned that this is where we prioritize our opportunities. Traditionally, in the world of quality, we use failure mode and effect analysis. In the world of innovation, we look into the future. So FMEA doesn't really work for us. We steal a tool from the financial futures market. In the world of finance, they're always looking at futures, and they use this VUCA tool. Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. So volatility, we ask, is this opportunity changing rapidly? Uncertainty, does this opportunity have a lot of unknowns? Does it have unknown unknowns? Complexity, is this opportunity intricate and complicated? Ambiguity, can this opportunity be interpreted more than one way? So different kind of questioning, and I think you'll find the VUCA tool is the right tool to use. Again, the standard doesn't prescribe tools. It's entirely up to you. Thing to remember, as with FMEA, risk is a multiplier. And not surprisingly, you can expect to explain your VUCA decisions to your auditor. So the portfolio, which I had promised a couple of times now to talk you through. Project management is about doing projects right. Portfolio management is about doing the right projects. In other words, deciding which projects we will pursue and which we will not pursue. So the portfolio enables us to prioritize our projects or elements of a project. And you can use different factors, risk versus return, ROI, degree. The standard uses the word novelty. I don't like it. It trivializes the standard. I'm going to say degrees of differentiation. Technology readiness is another thing that you would perhaps look at in the portfolio. The portfolio really leaves it up to you on how you will populate it, but you will ultimately list your options based on risk priority number. Two things that you will get with the portfolio. One, it communicates progress to your leadership. Two, it forces us to be honest with ourselves on the resources we've got available. As you build your portfolio and you list the different options that you've got, you'll reach a point where there are no more resources available. And you draw a hard and fast line there and say, until further resources become available, we can't do these remaining projects. And obviously, you rate them on risk priority. So, not surprisingly, you're going to have to explain the development of your portfolio, and changes in your portfolio to your auditor. Then collaboration. You know, collaboration, critically important, but people kind of think it's a couple of drinks on a Friday night and that's it. No, collaboration has to be entered with a real sense of purpose. It happens both internally and externally. I'm going to focus on external collaboration. Remember when I was talking about that SWOT analysis right at the beginning, clause 4.1? I mentioned that you'd find areas where you were deficient, say deficient on technology, deficient on competencies, deficient on equipment maybe. Those are going to be the areas that you pursue in collaboration. You're going to find someone else who's got those, given that you've got a particular opportunity you really want to pursue. So you've got to have a clear objective when you're collaborating. And that needs to be built into your innovation strategy. You will have thought about what your existing competencies and resources are. The risk, though, with collaboration is intellectual property. And clearly, you want to have a clear NDA between yourself and the people you're collaborating with. One of the things that people often do not think about in collaboration is, can we work with this other company? Do we respect each other? Do we trust each other sufficiently that we can be open with each other? I've done a lot of work in the Middle East. And people there spend a lot of time, should we say, sniffing out potential partners before they go into a collaborative agreement. It is so important that you are going to be able to work with the other party. So don't ignore that. Now, one of the things the auditor is going to be asking is, okay, how did you decide on where you're going to collaborate? You will have done it in both 4.1 context and 4.2 interested parties. In my book, and I'll show you the cover of my book at the end of the session, I go quite deeply into interested parties and what can often be conflicting requirements between different interested parties. So that's clause 6. We're now into clause 7. And forgive me here, but you see all the red that I put in. I'm going to go through these items very quickly because the area I want to focus on in clause 7, and remember clause 7 is the hub of our plan, do, check, act cycle. I'm going to focus on competence. So before I do that, these are the considerations you have in your resources. Time. Time gets stolen. You really want to lay out how much time is going to be spent on innovation. And of course, companies like 3M, Google are quite famous for the amount of time they spend, and they don't let it get stolen. A year or so back, Google were under a lot of pressure from shareholders to reduce that time in order to get increased short-term payback. It's difficult, but you've got to allocate your time. Money. You don't have any revenue yet when you're innovating. You've got to finance it from somewhere else. So that's where often, if you're a startup, you might go for a government grant or an angel investor. You notice that it doesn't say knowledge management. I put management in brackets. It's actually the management of knowledge. And having worked in R&D years ago, you've got to think so carefully about this because so much knowledge in R&D is tribal. It's not captured. It's not documented. But even when it is documented, people don't know where it is. You need to have a good knowledge retrieval process when you put information away, previous failures, how to pull up those things that happened 5 years ago. And I won't go into IP in any detail, but I will warn you about trolls. I mentioned already that I did consulting work with BlackBerry and got them certified to 9001. And while I was working with them, they suffered from an IP troll. And these are people who are out there and they patent a concept and they just sit there waiting for a company to commercialize that concept, and then they attack and take them to court. So beware of trolls. But where I want to go is competence. Let me just have a sip of my tea. Okay. So this is a list of innovation skills that you need to bear in mind. All too often I find human resource departments simply say innovation, but there are many skills, and these are only a few of them. These skills come from the World Economic Forum report on the future of jobs. It was published in 2015, updated 2020, not very well, rewritten in 2023. It's got a bit fragmented. If you go back to the original, that gives us these 6 critical skills for innovation. I would add project management and a few others, market research and product research. But for actual, should we say, core innovation activity, these are the ones that matter. You need to understand complexity. Great book for understanding complexity is the book called Chaos by James Gleick. Very readable. You want to be able to solve complex problems, but we realize very quickly we can't do this on our own. So we need collaboration, which I've mentioned already. But for collaboration to be successful, you need diversity and obviously a clear sense of purpose. Just as an aside, Professor Scott Page at Caltech did some research on the effect of IQ on problem solving. And he was shocked when he found that IQ had no effect. Diversity is what influences successful problem solving. But the challenge with diversity is it creates tension. We like to be comfortable with people like ourselves. And so this may come as a surprise. One of the key skills the WEF flagged was emotional intelligence. And that enables people to work together, be much more understanding of each other. And that matters. You might call these 3 enabling skills. And then we get to the core skills. No surprise here. Creativity for divergent thinking and critical thinking for convergent thinking. But it needs leadership to pull all of these together. And we have a principle on leadership which talks about leadership at all levels. Everybody involved in innovation is exercising leadership in some way or other. Now we get to the process. And quite a lot of clauses, as you can see. I won't go through them all now. I'm actually going to go through them in a moment. This clause 8.2 is really a project checklist. This is where I'm going to focus. So this is the model I've been using for probably 10 years now to explain the innovation process. And a lot of people think that innovation starts in the lab. And I say, no, I started my career in the lab. Innovation starts in the marketplace. And this is where I quote Plato. Plato said, necessity is the mother of invention. In other words, we're looking for unmet need that fits with our capability. Having found the need, we define it, And then we go into the classic activity that everybody thinks of with innovation. You know, the brainstorming, the ideation, the creative problem solving, and so on. But having generated lots of ideas here, I'll quote Linus Pauling, the best way to get a good idea is to get lots of ideas. He then said, throw away the bad ones. And that's what we do here. We collect data after we've done the concept work, and we use that data to narrow down our choices so that we've got down to maybe even just one, but no more than 2 or 3 options to go into the development stage. And we want to narrow down to our preferred option very quickly. And then finally we deliver. You'll notice that I put in these reverse arrows. That can happen. We want to avoid it. The word that gets used too often in the world of R&D is, oh, well, it's an iterative process. Too often, the cost overruns in the development stage is because there was not adequate proof of concept at the early creative stage. So let me take you now into the steps of the innovation process. The opportunity. So we've defined broad areas of opportunity in clauses 4.1 and 6.1. Now we're going to narrow it down into a specific opportunity. This is where we get really hands-on. And there's some really interesting techniques that can be used. One of them that I find fascinating is ethnographic research. Bear with me a moment. I tell you, don't fly. Deadly. I've been suffering all week. My apologies. So, ethnographic research, there's a great story from Lego going back 20 years ago. They were in trouble and their business was shrinking. So they sent out ethnographers to observe kids playing, putting in technical terms, to observe the customer experience. And what they learned will come as no surprise to you. They learned that when kids play, they talk to their toys. Of course they do. They tell stories. It's kind of ironic. We now educate adults on storytelling. But anyway, that's what Lego discovered. And so then they built stories into their products. They no longer sell a bucket of bricks, they sell a story. So that came from ethnographic research. That's a great technique for defining an opportunity. We're all used to Gemba in the world of quality, and this is just Gemba in the marketplace, observing behavior. The way you deal with the knowledge is through customer experience mapping, in which you capture the highs and lows of the customer experience. In a workshop, I'll normally go through customer experience mapping, and I do it for the hotel check-in process, which has a lot of highs and lows. The point is the lows are the innovation opportunities. And then, and this is where I find people frequently do not do it right, we define the opportunity. And I'm going to quote this guy. I couldn't do a session on innovation without including him. He's got a wonderful saying about defining the problem. He said, if I had an hour to save the world, I'd spend 55 minutes defining the problem. Now we get into creative problem solving, and it's important to have diversity of experience. There are many techniques, and I'm not going to go deep on any one technique, but I'll explain their commonality. The good ones all start with people individually writing ideas. That allows people to be a bit crazy. It avoids the fear of rejection. And then the ideas are circulated in some kind of random way to stimulate ideas. And quoting Linus Pauling again, the best way to get a good idea is to get lots of ideas. Now, what a lot of people don't realize is that often the best ideas don't come in the session that you've got there in the meeting room. They come between sessions, rather like with our friend Archimedes and his eureka moment. That's when the epiphany often comes. It's unexpected, but it's when people relax. You see, what Archimedes did and what our physics teacher never told us, he relaxed. He got in a bath, the water overflowed, but the important thing was he relaxed. And that's when he got his insight. So use multiple ideation sessions, have a way of capturing ideas between sessions, have some kind of electronic repository. I'm going to quote Albert again. He said, "No problem can be solved with the same level of consciousness that created it." Now, importantly here, you need data on time, cost, and risk, and you feed that into the execution processes. The validation, the proof of concept. We test our uncertainties and our assumptions. We evaluate the feasibility. Then we develop the solution into a working solution. We prepare deployment. And importantly, when we deploy, when we deliver our solution, we get ready to scale. And I always remember when we were writing the standard, we got to this point and somebody said, "Oh, scalability doesn't matter." And my answer was, well, if that's the case, you've clearly never had a successful innovation. I can speak from very painful personal experience. Scalability is critical. When I was in the Courtaulds group in the UK, I ran one of the businesses in that group. We had about 100 businesses. We employed about 100,000 people. Our chairman was Sir Christopher Hogg. He needed growth in the corporation. I gave him growth. I doubled the size of the business in 18 months. But cash flow was the problem. He funded my cash flow. I recruited the people. Those are the two things you need for scaling: good people and cash flow. Then naturally, once we deliver, we evaluate impact. So then we get into clause 9, the measurement clause, and I'm very conscious of time. So I'm just going to focus straight in on measurement. The kind of indicators that you can collect are input, throughput, output, and results. A lot of people talk about innovation results, number of products less than 3 years old, return on investment on new products, and so on. But to drive innovation, you need to be measuring input and throughput, resources and speed. And the Mayo Clinic's a great example. They measure support for innovation, the effectiveness of training, the effectiveness of their infrastructure. Is collaboration working? What are the results of the creative work? So they go at the front end of the innovation process. So improvement, I'm actually going to skip this slide, other than just to say, don't ignore it. Use the non-conformities from your internal audit to drive system improvement. But I want to sort of wrap up with this from Rita McGrath. A reminder that innovation only gives us transient advantage. We launch, we ramp up, and I just talked about that. We exploit, we make money. We'll find the competition catches up with us, so we probably have to reconfigure. But we mustn't be afraid to disengage. Kodak didn't do that, and you saw what happened. They kept making rolls of film, and yet they had invented the digital camera back in the 1970s. It takes courage to disengage, but you've got to do that. You've got to be ready to move on. So what do we get out of this? We get serial innovation. You're always looking for what's next. You reduce iteration, become much more efficient in your innovation process. That means you get to market faster. You're much more effective. But You engage your people. People love this. And it gives them teamwork. It gives them a sense of achievement. It means that historically we tended to look after our critical thinkers, but now we embrace our creative people as well. Innovation is a team sport. There's some very interesting research done by Martin Seligman, the guru of happiness. I laughed at that when I first came across it, but a government in the Middle East is using all his work. You see, what makes people happy is meaningful relationships and getting results. And that's why I like that definition I gave you at the beginning, something new that makes people happy. That's what innovation is. So, some resources for you. I mentioned my book. It's published by Quality Press, ISO 56000, Building an Innovation Management System. September's Quality Progress. I published an article in that Quality Progress. And we have an e-learning course that's just been launched. And I've put a QR code here for you. If you want to copy that, it'll take you straight into the course on our website. Or if you just go to the website on page 1, on the homepage, there is a place for the course that you can get into, or email me if you wish. So I want to thank you very much for your patience. We've run the full hour, but I hope I've given you value. Somebody did ask me if I would put the link to the culture assessment.
I've done that.
Yeah. Oh, thanks so much, Rhonda. You're a gem. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, I'm happy to take questions. There may be people who have to move on, but I'm very happy to take questions.
Yes, we have a couple, please, for you. So we have, this is from John Lewis in Salt Lake City, Utah. If he had an idea to develop or improve a product, he thinks a designed experiment would help find the ideal configuration. Could you tell the attendees your thoughts on design experiments and how they factor into innovation management, please, Peter?
Well, DOE has been around for a long, long time. It is a much more analytical approach than what I've talked about. I've tended to focus on creative problem solving. So DOE, I mean, I've got a background in design. You'll laugh when I tell you, I originally designed heavy chemical plants, and then I moved to the corporation I was with was Chemicals and Textiles. I moved to the textile side, and instead of designing chemical plants, I designed women's fashion. So a wide range of design experience. I find DOE is very analytical. No harm at all in using it. Absolutely no problem. And what I would emphasize within the context of this standard, John, we've deliberately written the standard. So you can use any approach you want in order to find solutions. It's totally up to you. Okay?
Thank you, Peter. The next one is from John Lamping, and he writes, how can you harness the standard to inform a patent filing?
How can I harness the standard to, what was the last word?
Patent filing. So you were talking about kind of the intellectual property capacities.
A patent filing. Okay. I've got personal experience with this. Believe it or not, I do have a patent to my name. It's been a long time ago. One thing, anyone who's had any interface with patents, you always get legal counsel to handle this. Get them to do the search. the analysis and everything. It is a very specialist area. So the standard actually has a clause on intellectual property. From memory, it's 7.1.5, something like that. And there is actually a whole supporting standard on intellectual property, and it's ISO 56005. ISO 56005. So that will give you a whole raft of information on IP. I'm not sure whether that's answered the question, John, but please come back at me if I need to say more.
Thank you so much, Peter. We also have Robin Rowe reaching out and saying hello. Please remember them from when they were the chairman of ISO 56007 Innovation Idea Management.
Yes.
Okay.
It started out as idea management and then became opportunity and idea management. And Robin, yes, I remember. My goodness, Robin, yes, it's come back to me. Yes, okay. I remember us in, oh my God, it must be 2 or 3 years ago that Robin, you and I interacted. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Peter. So my questions, we don't have any more in the queue, but I have 2 for you, Peter. One
Okay.
is for those people whom are live with us tonight or listening to this recording, and they may be new to innovation management. Is there one thing that you feel they could focus on to help their teams, their leadership, or their organizations really make the greatest step forward?
Okay. I'm going to give a really easy answer to that. The e-learning course has got the introduction and the first 2 chapters free. So you can learn about ISO 56000, which is all the fundamentals and concepts and principles. You can learn about ISO 56002. You can learn about SWOT analysis and culture and collaboration in those chapters. If you like what you find, then you can go into the rest of the course. There are 8 chapters in total. It's the equivalent of a 2-day course. But that's the easy answer. So just click on the QR code that's on the screen, and that'll take you into the course.
Thank you, Peter. Now, on the opposite side of that continuum, for someone who may be running an innovation lab or already very highly mature in this innovation management area or innovation writ large or quality, what would you advise for them, Peter?
Well, I would seriously advise them to look at the standard. If they are, we talk about startups, but what you're talking about here, Rhonda, is what we call grown-ups, as opposed to startups. If they are a grown-up and they want to be more effective in their innovation, that's what the standard is for. I mean, it's there for startups as well, obviously. But the problem with grown-ups is that they won't have grown in an orderly fashion. That's often the difficulty. And ISO 56001 and 56002 will be a big help in straightening things out.
Thank you, Peter. Well, thank you for a phenomenal session with us tonight, both building on the prior work, your introduction of ISO 56000 for many of us across the years, the culmination and publishing of the innovation body of knowledge with ASQ Innovation TC, and now really bringing this home with regard to the mechanism they can use to certify. So thank you so much for your thought leadership, for your standards leadership, and for really helping us all move forward in this very seminal area. Is there any closing comments, Peter, that you have to make to those attending before we
Well,
move to the last part?
I apologize for my coughing through the course of the session. Not what I'd planned on, but we got there in the end. And I would say to everybody, innovation is a tough game. It's a team sport. Don't give up. Keep at it. You need to be tenacious. Thanks, Rhonda. Thank you so much for hosting this.
Thank you, Peter. I'm going to share this last little part so we can recognize our team here. So for those of you who are still on the line or listening to the recording, all of these webinars are done under the auspices of our ASQ Innovation Technical Community Officers, Miss Rebecca Mott, Miss Jackie Jolly, and Mr. Larry Miller. We love having you involved in our technical community, and our chair invites you to fill out her pipeline and her volunteer survey so we can better understand how you might want to serve the technical community, and we will learn more about you and how we can better serve you. If you want to collaborate, communicate, and discuss the wonderful topic that you've heard Mr. Peter Merrill speak on tonight or our other prior webinars, we invite you to go to our My ASQ Innovation TC website. It will be included in the after deck that we send to you. If you are not familiar with ASQE, that's ASQ raised to the power of excellence. They have an Insights on Excellence research series, of which innovation plays a key part. So we invite you to see their different reports and program offerings and invite you to an upcoming session that they host quarterly, as well as a year-end special event. If you are not a member of ASQ or ASQE, we welcome you to join us as a valued member. And we invite you to attend our upcoming webinar events. Again, our chair, Ms. Rebecca Mott, is a catalyst, evangelist, and thought leader within the innovation space, and she is hosting a special series on innovation body of knowledge content. In November, we talk about innovation and the organizational structure. In December, we talk about the innovation process, and we continue this as we move into 2025. We welcome you to our November webinar with Mr. Zubair Anwar, who will talk about quality innovation in Industry 4.0 and 5.0 and what that means to our leadership and our workforce. And then again in December for our phenomenal thought leader, Miss Grace Duffy, who will talk about continuous improvement is a Mobius strip. We thank you so much for joining us, for joining Mr. Peter Merrill and his wonderful talk on innovation certification, the creation of ISO 56001. And we welcome you all back to a future event. With that, have a wonderful rest of your week, a wonderful weekend, and that will be Innovation Technical Community out for tonight. Good night, everyone.
Rhonda, before you sign off,
Yeah.
I'm going to send you a PDF of the slides that I use so that you can circulate it if you wish. All right?
And that will be absolutely perfect because we will love it, and we will send it out with their